Oh boy. All right. Y'all see the live on your side?
Yes.
Okay. Mm. Hey, Raven. All righty. Well, first of all, thank y'all so much for agreeing to show up and, pour out a little of yourselves on this Saturday evening. Saturday evening for the preachers, they preparing for Sunday.
I'm off today, so I'm good.
But I must say, I do appreciate y'all very, very much. As I've shared with you all, Derry Anderson, she's one of my new student orientation leaders, currently at Fort Valley State University. This is her first year as a new student orientation leader.
Nice. Folk Valley.
FVSU-ish. Y'all see the shirt?
Yes.
But she'll be joining us just to engage in a dialogue. Any input y'all want from her, her perspective, she is open to it. So at this point, we will begin to get started. Introduction beginning with Joya. Miss Joya Moore, my Augusta sister, is a Master of Divinity candidate at Candler School of Theology of Emory University, where she also serves as the student body president, Candler School of Theology. Ms. Moore is also an associate minister at Wheat Street Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all for having me.
Next up, we have my good paying college brother, Mr. Dominique Lester. He is currently a PhD student at Columbia University and serves as the Chief of Staff of Greater Centennial AME Zion Church in Mount Vernon, New York. Thank you, Dominique.
Thank you.
Again, we have Daryl, the queen of the NSO right now, stepping up.
Come on, queen of NSO. Oh, yes.
Stepping up. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to give y'all the floor. Again, this is I Can't Breathe, Empowerment for Black Lives. Really just want you all to, go with the flow. I know y'all are some true wisdom seekers and pourers, so I'm looking forward to it myself. And tag team and do what you got to do. Thank y'all.
Wow. So, Joya.
Yes, sir.
So I kind of want to follow your lead. I know you're a juggernaut in this work, and you're the president of my alma mater.
Yes.
So I kind of want to follow your lead tonight.
Okay.
I want you to drive the boat.
Okay. Now y'all have to know, like, Dominique is one of my dear friends. He actually, I don't know if he's okay with me saying this, but I'm gonna say it. He is one of the reasons that I am in seminary right now. This man, like, he goes by the name Prophetic Provocateur, and he lives up to the hype. Okay, he definitely was just in this prophetic moment. I was literally working my last job in the inventory room. He randomly says, I think Lord is telling you to go to seminary. It wasn't even I think. It was very sure. And it really got on my nerves, let's be clear, because I had already known that. But to have your friend randomly tell you that that's what God is saying to do right now.
Wow.
But it completely.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even know y'all had that connection.
Yes.
That I didn't even know that. Look at God.
Look at God. But he is definitely one of my dear friends, and I'm super grateful for the work that he's been doing, is doing, just as a Black man in academia, as a Black person, let's be clear, in academia, but as a Black man who is balancing that mantle of academics and also the work in the church. So I just want to shout my brother out for that and for his guidance and wisdom and kindness. So for him to give me the floor, my point is saying all that, for him to give me the floor is a twist of events that we probably didn't see coming 3 years ago. But here we are. Wow. Okay, so I wanted to just start just kind of talking about Juneteenth and what it means. And one of the things that I shared with Dominique earlier this week is that I always like to flip things on its side or look at things from an angle that people typically don't, look at them. And so when you think about Juneteenth, there is a woman by the name of Dr. I want to say her name correctly, Shanette Garrett Scott. She did a talk at maybe a museum in Texas. And so if you guys get a chance, go to YouTube and check it out. But she talks about the background of Juneteenth, and I've actually been watching this video probably for the last couple years. I just really enjoy the way that she talks about it. But one of the things that stood out to me about her speaking about Juneteenth is she said that even though Juneteenth was a day where people or where the general came to Galveston and let the enslaved men and women know that they were now free based off the Emancipation Proclamation, which had been signed 2.5 years ago. There were people there, but there was a group of people, maybe 500,000 to about 800,000 slaves who had already gone. They had already left and were no longer enslaved at that point. And so I thought that was just such a critical, such a interesting piece of that history. And she actually intentionally shared it because she kind of wanted to debunk some of the thought behind it. So Juneteenth is this beautiful day, but to me, in this time that we're in right now, it made me think about, man, what does it mean to not wait on those papers or those orders? What does it mean, and what does it require? And so I just kind of jotted down a few things about liberation. And I specifically, was thinking about Black women. But as I was just kind of getting ready and thinking about everything, a lot of what I wrote down was, I think, pertaining to Black men as well. So, Dee, I look forward to us just kind of engaging. Yeah. I just want to present a few thoughts, and then I'll, same with you. But the quote that I kind of jotted down my thoughts based on was a quote from Fannie Lou Hamer, and it says, "When I liberate myself, I liberate others." And so the question I didn't ask myself was, what does it mean to be bound, and what are some of the ways that we are bound as Black people, as well as specifically as Black women? So I'll just open the floor for thoughts on that idea, that notion, before I say anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool piece to kind of to settle into. Similar to you in that same manner, as I began to think about Juneteenth, I began thinking about it from a bit of a sociology perspective. I kind of picked up W.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. So thinking about what you said with this notion of people already being low-key free.
Yeah.
This was a time also where the Civil War in many ways sparked this perhaps one of the very first labor strikes that we see in American history, whereby the Civil War and these slaves, these people who were enslaved, they were now in a place where they're like, you know what, y'all, I think we can really do this for real now.
Seriously.
These folk are fighting. These folk are in upheaval. They are on the verge of losing everything, their influence, their authority, their power. And they're like, okay, the iron is hot. Let's go.
That's right.
And the most beautiful aspect of this entire Black Reconstruction period from 1860 to 1880 was that this was perhaps the very first time, and to this date, I believe, in history, where we had so many legislators in Congress where they were Black.
Yeah.
Fresh out of slavery.
Yes.
These folk were impacted by the idea that it's time for us to vote.
Yeah.
It's time for us to create policy in a manner that, although white gaze is always surveilling us, we have an opportunity to legislate ourselves, even as I was once 2 months ago a slave.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of what you bring into the discussion is this idea of liberating myself so that I can liberate somebody else.
Yeah.
It becomes imperative that we not only recognize the symbolism of freedom, but we recognize that there are some policies and documents that also serve as symbols
Yeah.
for that freedom to not only appease white folk, but to help us realize that we actually do have a stake in this country,
Yeah.
whereby we've been treated as second class citizens for far too long.
Yeah.
So, what does it mean for folk who've been enslaved for all this time to now feel empowered to
Yeah.
be a part of the legislation process, the electoral process, and have a stake in that? I
Right.
think that liberating of yourself piece that you bring up is foundational
Yeah.
to the conversation of what Juneteenth represents and what this notion of liberation actually means for the future and as we go forward.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, D, when you think about the history of Juneteenth, it started, 1865. They talk about that when the announcement was made, people were dancing and singing and celebrating. But then years later, it, like you just said, it became a time for Black people to talk about voting and legislation. That's where people would actually come and actually say, okay, we know it's going to be, excuse me, this group of Black people here. This is where we need to go and campaign. And so Juneteenth, while it's this time where we're celebrating, and now we celebrate the way Black people celebrate, we get together, we barbecue, we march, all these other beautiful things. But I think it is incredibly powerful that it's also around a time where voting in this country to this very day is a critical piece
Yeah,
of our freedom, and
yeah,
it continued. And whether, I don't know if that was, I don't know if that was just the Lord, as far as the coordination of that, but for us to have just been voting, just last Sunday, I preached about, or there was a piece of my sermon that I talked about voter suppression and how that is still a very real problem for Black communities, where we've already recognized the power of our voice, but so have they. You know
yes,
what I mean? They recognize it as well. And so they're going to put things in place like faulty voting machines
yeah,
in Black neighborhoods, because they recognize that power and that freedom. And even with speaking about someone like Fannie Lou Hamer, I was just listening to this documentary about her, and I was blown away at the boldness of this woman, and how it was like she knew in her soul that this was not right, even at a time where they still weren't necessarily enslaved, but they were in this situation where they could not leave, these farms without talking to the owner and that kind of thing. It was still very much this mindset of slavery. And she was like, absolutely not. This woman ran for she attempted to run for Congress.
yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
that's boldness some of us don't have today. So I
yeah,
do think that those pieces are layered,
yeah,
and that we have to keep in mind the power of voting. Whereas our voices have been suppressed, and people recognize that even though we vote, it feels like the progress isn't being made. We have to continue, like you said, they recognize it was time to strike while the iron is hot. And I think we're seeing another hot iron.
yeah, for
And
sure.
we are striking and need to continue striking.
Yeah, so let me ask you this then.
Okay.
So, just for the sake of critical engagement, right?
Oh goodness. Let me pull out my books. Let me see. Hold on. Who you? What professor do I need to
No, no,
reference?
I think this is going to draw on truth telling from your soul, right?
Okay.
I'm interested in that same vein of how can men and women strike together while the
Mm,
iron is I
mm,
think what we've seen as it relates to a lot of critique on social media, a lot of critique in academic institutions, a lot of critique within churches about who's doing and who's not doing.
yeah.
How do we create some type of synergy
Yeah.
as it relates to how Black men and Black women make meaning and make sense of this collective work of healing and pressing forward and striking while the iron is hot? Because I'm afraid that if we continue in the narrative that we're in currently, we're going to find ourselves beefing with each other
Yeah.
and not in a place where we don't have to worry about COVID-19 or racism taking us out. We're going to take each other out.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as you know, as the scholar activist that you are, as the leader that you are, the theologian that you are,
Yeah.
the actress and the
Oh,
entertainer that you are, the worshiper that you are.
come on.
Come
You
on.
created some
I
worship.
wonder, from your perspective, how do we support us? How do we support each other? How do we deal with self to
Yeah.
make sure that we're well and not
Yeah.
bleeding on people and not bleeding on each other? I don't want to create like where women that have to always teach men, but how do we get to a place where we're teaching each other and
Yeah.
growing with each other to do this work?
Okay. All right now. So you asking me to
I threw,
Come
I,
go
on.
there.
yo,
Come
I
on.
threw, I threw you an alley oop.
You
Did.
listen, but listen. Are you are they gonna like what I have to say?
It
It
don't
doesn't
So
matter.
matter.
Truth to power.
It
listen.
doesn't matter.
I think that this space that is between black men and women. First, I think we have to, and we talked about this earlier this week. I think we have to acknowledge where it started. I think we have to honor the fact that this this space or this chasm that's there was intentional.
Yeah.
And it started, if we're talking about our time here in America, when we got here, there was an intentional breaking of the black family. There was an intentional breaking of the black man, and an intentional breaking of the black woman. But it did leave us in a space where women had to step up in our households. You know what I mean? Because of what was happening to our men. That's just the history behind it, right? So then, from what I can see, it then became uh, this idea where we started to name black women, Mammy and Jezebel. We started to give black women all these horrible names, and then say that black women are emasculating black men. And now, please understand, anything happens in any type of situation. So this isn't just the end all be all, but I do believe that there is a trend where we started to create this idea of who black women were and who black women were not. Same thing with black men.
Yeah.
You started to be portrayed as either the strong man who was not smart at all, or even now people are saying black men, they don't love their families, they go to jail or they're not in their homes, and so these narratives have been created, and I think that that's one piece of it, right? So we have these narratives that we're having to in some ways live, but I think more importantly we have to really look at the root of the my good friend Chris always says the root of something. You have to look at the root issue, and that it's really not, I don't think, black woman against black man intentionally, but there are things and systems and problems and that have been put in place for us to have a problem with one another.
For sure.
The second piece that I think may be more critical is that black men have to acknowledge the ways in which they have been harmful to black women. And I'm waiting on Dominique's face. I'm like,
No, I'm writing it down.
because we as black people, one of the things we say to white people all the time is you have to, acknowledge the wrong. Anytime you want to, I just took a class on peace building. You have to acknowledge the wrongdoing, and there has to be repentance, and then there has to be reparations. That does not just apply between black people and white people. Yeah. It also applies to us as a community. And I think if black men, and this is a general statement because there's a lot of black men that I try to surround myself with positive black men who aren't, who deal with their stuff, go to therapy, not, okay. But if there are also black men who live by this idea that women are, supposed to be subservient and you're supposed to bow down. I saw a meme the other day. The man was like, black women aren't going to be protected until they are submissive to black men. You saw that?
Oh,
What? Why does it have to? You know what I mean? Black
Right.
women aren't saying, "Well, we're not gonna protect black men, or we're not gonna stand up for black men until y'all stop doing X, Y, Z to us." So what is that? You know, that idea. So I think there has to be an acknowledgement of the pain and the trauma and the silencing, the
Mhm.
intentional silencing
That's good.
of the black woman's voice, because we live it, so we know it's real. But if there is no acknowledgement, there's going to be this perpetual resentment, I think, between the black woman and black man. And we will make progress, but maybe not as fast and maybe not as efficient or as productive as we can be, because we're not addressing those issues that plague us within our own homes and communities. Thoughts?
First of all, that was bold and courageous, and we thank you for that. I definitely thank you for sharing that perspective. Um, and I feel like we were just in a boxing match, and you like just threw a haymaker.
Come on, bro. Whatever.
Wonderful.
Because I
um,
know you're gonna bring that fire.
yeah, I think everything that you said. Period. I think that's a lot of truth in what you said. And I think the piece that stuck out the most was this piece of acknowledging how black men have been harmful. And
Yeah.
I think one of the challenging aspects of this acknowledgement of how folk have been harmful is this idea of relinquishing power.
Talk
Um,
about it.
these are the same type of pieces that we encourage white folk to do, to be
Yeah.
not allies. I
Yeah.
hate ally language.
Okay.
I
Okay.
prefer accomplice,
Hmm.
someone that's willing
Awesome.
to be in trouble with me and do the work with me,
That's good.
regardless of the challenges that will come up.
Yeah.
So we don't want to relinquish power, because if we go back to your initial argument of the vestiges of slavery, right? The residuals of
Yeah.
slavery, I don't had everything snatched from me.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'm publicly lynched.
Yes.
I
Mm.
am publicly castrated in front of folk.
Yes.
Um,
Literally.
literally,
Sometimes.
I
And
am on
yeah.
a lynching tree.
Yes.
You know, I am the victim of state sanctioned mass murder and execution.
Yeah.
And these pieces show up in such residual ways that we pass them on from generation to generation to generation. So much so that we don't even see stuff wrong
Yeah.
with half of
Come
the
on.
behaviors, half of the rhetoric, half of the actions,
Yeah.
half of the things that we do unbeknownst to us, that these are just pieces of us that we carry with us
Yeah.
from relationship to relationship, job to job, space to space. So I think what you're on to some major stuff, as this piece of being able to acknowledge harmfulness. I, as a rebuttal, and just for the sake of argument, um, I think what it is that a lot of men, we just feel like we need to be needed.
Okay.
We feel like we we know you don't necessarily need us, but we want you to want us.
Still need it. Yeah.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? We
Sure.
want to feel like we can contribute something, you know what I'm saying, to you. So then our egos are bruised when, you know what I'm saying, to see the girls is saying, you know what I'm saying, like you know what I'm saying, we're done. There's no more
Yeah.
use for us. So not only does our country have no need of us, not only are we expendable by the police,
Even the home.
now I can't even be at home with
Yeah.
Yeah.
my old lady, and she don't even need me. James
Yeah.
Cole, and we go to the church piece, right? James
Yeah.
Cole said that the black church is one of the only places where you can be ridiculed and pissed on all week long by your supervisor, but get to the church on Sunday
Yeah.
morning and be the chairman of the deacon board.
My
That's
my.
Yeah.
the only places that you can be whole.
Yeah.
And I'd argue that, like, man, sometimes my brother just want to come home and
Yeah.
and feel what they need to feel the same way that you need to feel what you need to feel. And I just don't know if enough of critical discussions are being held around how we be with each other.
Yeah.
How do we deal with trauma? How do us as men deal with fear? I'm terrified
Right.
of relationships because I don't want nobody to have to deal with the fact that I might not come home at night because I was murdered
Mm.
by the police.
That's real.
It's terrifying.
Yo, like
It's
the
terrifying.
thought of stepping out on Fifth Avenue and 129th when I go outside, I'm terrified that the police might not like the way I look at them.
Yeah.
You know, and the way my body tenses up when the police get behind me, I
Yes.
automatically grab my phone and start recording what I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the hairs on my arms stand up. I
Yeah.
start to sweat. My
Yep.
arms are like I be like having a fresh shirt. They got sweat patches all up. I start to feel like I'm about to die.
Yeah.
And because of our most of our caring natures, we don't want to have to have nobody deal with the stuff that we're going to leave behind because we the man. We want to provide
Wow.
for our family. We want to do these things. So a lot of I think the terror, if you will, that a lot of men wreak on folk is out of fear. And I think a lot of us would be better off if we got us a therapist and went to saw him weekly.
Let's be clear. So, okay, can
I
we
enjoy my therapist.
I do too.
listen? Me
Great
too.
idea.
So, okay, so can we go to that piece, and we can go. There was two things that you kind of you said there, because I think we're speaking the same language, in that it feels like it's kind of this circle,
Yeah,
the same idea that you're worried about city girls, we're worried about the CBJs of the world,
that's
talking
right.
Here,
about
here.
you on my bus.
That's
You
right.
feel me? You know what I mean?
That's right.
So it is like we need to learn who the real enemy is, and figure out how to show up
Yeah,
with each other and say, listen, I'm your partner, I'm your friend, I'm your boo, I'm your bae. We
yeah.
in this thing together, and mean it. Because
Out and mean
that's
it.
Right.
that's the
That's
problem.
the part.
Mean it. You know
Mean
what
it.
I mean? And know when to hold them and when to fold
That's
them.
right. That's right.
So, but I think that we've been so busy surviving. We've
Yeah.
been so busy just trying to make it, trying to feed our children, that for the longest, we're in a privileged position, I think, as probably in all of our families. I'm assuming, I may be wrong, that we're first generation of people going to therapy in our families.
Yeah.
That's not the norm.
Yo,
That's
my
not the norm.
my mother would see me go to the altar at church, and sis would be like, "Yo, you all right?"
Yeah.
Or the first time I told him I was going to therapy, she like hit me up was like, "You all right? Like, what's the problem?" This stuff is
Yeah.
foreign.
This is true.
Yes.
It's like something's wrong with you that you
Yeah.
going to, and
Therapy.
it's those old vestiges of what goes on in my house, stay in my house.
Stays in my house. Listen, sweep it under the rug, keep it going.
Yeah,
But it's problematic. Okay, so let's talk about. We mentioned it. The church. Since you brought up this piece of of how do I describe it? How black you talk about black men specifically, but black women as well. Um, can be in these spaces all week long and then show up at the church, and you chairman of the deacon board, or you over the mothers, or you've
mother.
been chief usher for 22 years. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Can we talk about liberation within the church? What does that look like in
Mm.
our denominations? How do we deal with the patriarchy that's very real?
yeah,
Um, and also, how do we deal with this? We talked the other day about ageism,
yeah,
this gap between the generations, where I wrote a paper on this. How do we address the very real fear for these people who've been respected in these roles, and these roles have fed them, but then also let them know that we are kind of at a time and a place where it's time for this next generation to come. Who was it? Dr. Angela Davis. she talked about that. She said one of the things that I continue to tell people when I go and I talk to these communities and these activists is that it's time for my generation to get out of the way. So how do we do that? How do we create that type of um, space where people still feel like a person, they still feel valued, but then we progress the work of the church because a lot of what we do is antiquated.
Not only is it antiquated, it's just not helpful. And
Mm, tell the truth. We
and
talk about boldness.
listen, so
Out the gate.
I think much of the challenge is that we don't want to make space for other people.
Wow.
We don't want. We represent what they want. However, I don't believe they want our bodies. We need young people to do this, but they don't want our minds
Yeah. Wow.
because our minds are totally wired in a way that is antithetical to much of the things that they've been taught.
Yeah.
And the challenge
Yeah.
of it becomes this is you not finna disrupt my Jesus time.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge of that becomes that this is perhaps a place for folk that's retired, folk that are widowed, that this is the only place they got to come on a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally. Yes, some
Agreed.
folk they live to go to Bible study, missionary meeting, church on Sunday, all 12 services we have. They go to choir rehearsal, they go to the prayer meeting, they go to do visitations, they go to every funeral for folk who died in the church. This is all they do.
Funeral. They go to all the
They go
funerals.
to all the funerals, they know who got the body, they know everything.
How long the body been there?
How long the body been there?
Come
And
on.
who brought the drinks and the chicken for the repast? They know
Okay.
they live for this
Yeah.
somewhere.
You're
And
right.
I
You're
think
so
we have to create, space and opportunity where it is not just the illusion of intergeneration ministry and work, but it's
Wow.
really the work of doing
Yeah.
intergenerational ministry. And I don't
Yeah.
think that we bend toward each other enough. The
Yeah.
rhetoric I hear in my church often is that the young people don't bend toward the old people. I
Yeah.
said that's because you're too busy berating and telling us what we're doing is wrong.
Wow.
So why I don't want to listen at you. I don't want to give to your church. I don't want to do none of that when you telling me everything I do is wrong. Everything the
Yeah.
way I show up is wrong. You don't like my hair. You don't like my clothes. You hate that I wear Gucci to church.
one
You
of
hate
my
everything about my aesthetic.
Yeah.
that's
And
it.
the politics of respectability are
Wow.
so pervasive,
Yes.
if you will.
Yeah.
So much so that the church is no longer. I don't want to go to church.
Yeah.
I'd rather church hop on Sunday.
Yeah.
And,
Online.
and when you start talking stupid, I can click to my second church.
That's right.
And when they get stupid and they get dead there, I can go to my third church.
Yep.
But I no longer have to listen to your foolishness because this idea of many folk having a bankrupt theology and disruptive doctrine, I don't have to deal with it because I know the Lord for myself.
You know, that's good.
So the idea of making space becomes essential, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to bend toward each other.
Yeah.
So let me add this since y'all went to the whole church and the generation. So one of my former students made a post, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, let's talk about it. So her first thing was, let me go ahead and say this first. We have left the church, but we still have religion.
That's right.
Wow. Let's be
Church
clear.
church in its entirety has lost the title of a sacred place and has become a toxic environment.
That's right.
Wow.
That's the first point. Number two, church people have made them feel uncomfortable.
That's
Like
right.
y'all was just saying. So it's just
Wow.
amazing how y'all just circle back to that. And she just made this post like yesterday.
Alatoria, it's an abusive relationship.
Comments now. It's about 60 comments.
Yo,
Wow.
Giving their feedback.
it's an abusive relationship.
It
It's
is.
abusive.
It
And
is.
and it's one of the only places where folk expect you to let them disrespect you, and you supposed to be all right with it.
Right.
Hmm.
It's interesting that we came to this place because one of the things that I wrote down is we have all these different ways that we are bound and how do we get free. I think you hit the nail on the head, Dominique. I talked about it being bound by the ideas and thoughts of those who are not necessarily close to you. So people in your church, people at your job, people in all these spaces that are not necessarily personal, but they become very harmful to us. And I think that we've recognized that, like she said, it's toxic, and that's a way of being bound. and we refuse to be bound. Like we talk about therapists. I went to my therapy, one of my earlier therapy sessions, and we started talking. I was, had all this anger and resentment, and she helped me to uncover that the anger and resentment I felt was like towards the Black church. I can't say all Black churches are the same. Y'all know my professor, Dr. Teresa Fry Brown. She don't let me say all, the Black
Yeah.
church. But in my experience, is what she tells me to say, that it was very, very toxic. And that I started to carry that resentment. And I then also started to resent people who were who
Right.
reflected that
That's
that
right.
same feeling of making me feel bound. Very
So,
interesting.
so Joya, as we get ready to wind our time together
Yeah.
down, can you like just give us an encouraging word uh,
Okay.
to to help us to get through these challenges, to help us deal with the culmination of this Juneteenth weekend,
Yeah.
um, in this beautiful series that Alatoria put together. Help us, give us something to feast on as we move
Mm.
into our next.
Wow. I wrote some things down, but I believe I'm just gonna go ahead and come from right here. So I think when you consider what it means to be bound, it's important for you to analyze the things and the people and the situations that have you bound. And we've talked a lot about those situations, those people, those institutions, those experiences that we have of being bound. But I think one of the things that we have to do is go back to our childhood. Go back to the versions of ourselves that we were when we were little and we were happy and we were playing and we
Yeah,
were, just free before anybody or any institution or any type of law told us who or what we were supposed to be. Who was that person?
yeah,
So find a way to go back to that person. I recommend therapy.
yeah,
I recommend going and sitting down with someone who's good at it, because obviously there's good and bad therapists as
for sure.
any you know any occupation. Find a therapist that you connect with. My therapist is a Black woman. She graduated from my HBCU with her PhD. She wears her hair natural. I was like, oh yes, sis, we're here. And so I believe it's important for us to get back to who we are.
Yeah,
I think it's also important for us. I told y'all, I preached a sermon on the book of Esther, and I was so blown away by the character of Vashti and the fact that she was a queen. She was literally, had what most people consider had it all. She
yeah,
was she was in the room. She had the position, but she recognized that even though she had the position, it was really a facade.
yeah,
She didn't really have the power that she may have thought she had, because the king was bold enough to ask her to come into that room. Whether he asked her to be naked or not, he still invited her into a room full of drunken men. But her power came when she recognized that she had the right to say no,
that's
and
right.
she did. And so, I talked about, the importance of resisting. And so I think you have to recognize who you are, right? And do all you can to be that person, that authentic version of yourself. But then I also think you have to resist those things and those people that will come into your life and try to change you into who they think you should be,
That's right.
instead of allowing you
Yeah.
to honor who you really are. So at the end of the day, if you want to wear Gucci to church, by all means wear Gucci to church. You know what I'm saying? If you feel like, listen, you know your little shorts, you want your shorts a certain, you don't want them down to your ankles. You don't want to wear the big skirt. You know what I'm saying? Live your life.
Yeah,
Obviously, I'm talking about church, but also when you talk about us going into these institutions. So we're talking about, if I'm speaking to college students specifically, one of the things I thought about is that we go into these spaces and we're told how to write,
yeah,
we're told how to talk. We're taught, whether people say it in our faces or behind our backs, that our names aren't, white enough. They too many syllables. All these ways that are demeaning. One of the ways that I like claim my space is literally I wear big hoop earrings. I'll be on calls. It may be me and one other Black person. I'm gonna wear these hoops because for so long I was taught it was inappropriate. I'm gonna wear them to church if I want. You know what I mean?
that's right.
Because I refuse to allow people to tell me who and what I'm supposed to be.
Yeah,
The last piece, um, two things. Breathing. You know, we talk about I can't breathe. And so I just looked into this idea of breathing. And the thing about it is, our authenticity actually is tied to our ability to breathe and
That's
our ability to function well.
that's
And
right.
so a lot of times we get anxious, and we get shortness of breath. And you know, one lady said she got to the point where she was waking up in the middle of the night coughing. You know, and that's happened to me because I wasn't living an authentic life. And so that pain and all these things that I wasn't dealing with started to deal with me. And I literally was losing my breath. You
That's
know,
right.
and that carried with me all the way into my first year of seminary until I started having anxiety attacks. And I was like, wait a minute, sis. This is
Right.
not the path that I don't choose to walk this path. But I had to honor myself. But then I also had to just deal with my stuff, right?
Mhm.
And I encourage Black people, if we are in this world and we're being we every time we turn on our phone, we see pictures, we see videos, we see literal murders that we are carrying with ourselves. We have to deal with that stuff,
That's
or
right.
it literally will take our breath away.
That's right.
So in order for us to breathe, I think we have to just look at those things or realize when it's time to pull away from them as well. Deal with that stuff so that we can actually move well, you know, and live well. And I think, I mean, I think it boils down to owning ownership,
Yeah.
owning who you are, and being bold and resisting all the things that would come in, make your life troublesome, or lead you and guide you into spaces that God has not called you to. So,
You know, so you just threw me the most beautiful alley oop, right? I'm
I
about
keep
to
walking.
listen. So I appreciate you sharing that because it helps me to flesh out my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So as I was preparing for our time together tonight, um, God took me to Jeremiah,
Okay.
chapter 12, verse 5. And it's simple. The text is very simple. It says, if you have raced with men on foot
My.
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
they
it,
have
God.
worn you out,
Come on.
how can you compete with horses? And that thing just bothered me
Yeah.
because the reality of it is that Jeremiah was simply in a place where he was asking God, how much longer do we got to deal and mourn with this foolishness in the land?
How long?
And God simply responds to him with the Jeremiah, if you race with men on foot,
Come on.
Makes you
and
tired.
they done made you tired with their pettiness. They done made you tired trying to derail you. They done try to take you out the game, confuse and disorient you. What makes you think
Yeah.
that you will be prepared for the stable of horses
Yeah.
Come on.
that are mounting up to come against you?
Hmm.
Because in that stable, there are horses of white supremacy.
Ooh,
Wow.
In that stable, there are horses of racism.
Come on,
In
preach.
that stable, there are horses of bigotry and misogyny. In that stable, there are horses of miseducation and voter suppression. In that stable, there
Come
are
on,
horses
preacher.
of fake woke people and unjust laws.
Come
In
on.
that stable, there are horses of police brutality and redlining. In
Yeah.
that in that store, that stable, there are horses of modern day lynchings,
come on.
Yeah.
disproportionate discipline for black boys and girls with proponents of mass incarceration. In that stable,
Yeah.
there are horses of oppression. And many of us feel like we got to get away from all of that mess. And the challenge of it becomes that Jeremiah was in this liminal space, much like all of us on this call tonight, because we feel like we're in between Juneteenth
Yeah.
Come
and
on.
in between being set free.
Come
I'm
on.
in between bondage
Yeah.
and being free.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the challenge of it is, how do I get away from this mess and this idea of God reminding us that the seasons of dealing with men and foolishness is preparing us to
Wow.
deal with the horses that are ahead of us? I'm encouraged by the ancestors who thought enough and thought it not robbery to keep on running when they
Yeah.
heard the dogs.
Yeah.
Who thought it not robbery to keep on running when they heard the slave catchers.
Yeah.
Because they remind us of that liminal space between bondage and freedom. So much so that Jesus reminds us of that same liminal space.
Come on, sir.
Because at one time when he was about to head up the hill to Golgotha, Jesus found himself in that liminal space, understanding, believing that he too has to run away to the places that God is calling him to do. It's not a matter of him derailing or not wanting to confront his current circumstances, but he knew in order for you and I to be free, and free indeed, he had to go to the cross so that we may have life and life more abundantly.
Come
So
on,
I'm
sir.
grateful.
Are you in the text? Or are you in the
Listen, it's there.
It's in the book.
It's there. It's there. It's right there.
It's in the book.
So I can imagine him being on the cross and them mocking him, and he's still saying, "I got to go away, so that I can prepare a place for them."
Come on.
I can imagine him being on the cross, looking to his left and seeing Joya, and looking to his right and seeing Dominique and saying, "I got to go to a place to prepare for these my children." I can imagine God and Jesus being on the cross and him looking down at George Floyd for that 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Wow.
As that brother laid there saying, "I can't breathe. Where's my mama? I got to go to a place to be prepared for my children." And I'm encouraged tonight, and I hope this encourages some man, some woman, some boy, some girl, that there will come a time where you have to do like what Plutarch's Lives says. It says that when Cicero spoke, the people marveled and said, "Oh, well, how he speaks." But when Demosthenes spoke, the people said, "Let us march." That is our mandate. That is our charge to keep our hair. So much so that we show up in a manner that when we open up our mouths and prophetically declare what the Lord tells us to say, that people are compelled to march. People are compelled to do a thing. People are compelled to love better. People are compelled to live better. People are compelled to be in community better. And that is the call tonight as we deal with this Juneteenth culmination celebration. That is important that when we open up our mouths and when we move our feet, people are compelled to say, "Point me to the place where you've seen the Lord for yourself." Because if I can see God the way you see God, I know that everything will be all right with me.
That's it.
So that's my encouragement for tonight.
Yeah.
This thing about these men and these horses is gonna hold me.
Yeah.
Because church folk work my nerve. And they do so in a way that make you question everything God ever said. But when God makes a promise, as you've alluded earlier, when God opens up a door, when God turns the key, I believe that there is no man, no woman, no power, or no principality that will cause you not to get what God has intended for you.
Listen.
So I'm encouraged by your story tonight, Joya, because it reminds me to keep listening to God and keep my hand in his hand. And you've encouraged us all tonight to continue to fight for freedom, to fight for liberation, and to free ourselves, but always not just reaching back, but reaching to our left and our right, taking people along with us. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Wow. That was heavy. That's good. That's letting all that resonate. Derek, you had anything you want to add or comment?
I just want to say thank you for letting me come in because that was amazing. From the thing that moved me the most was the conversation about the problem we have between black men and black women. Mm-hmm. It's like we never get the side of what Dominique said. Like we never get the side of truth because, like you said, we get the city girls and then we get the futures of the world that are just like, they're misogynist. She got to kneel to my feet and stuff like that. We never really get to see how men really think about or how they really feel because they're really hiding it or they just don't really choose to feel. So I think that was the biggest piece for me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, for sure.
Well, I thank y'all. As I shared with y'all before, telling y'all what this is about, the I Can't Breathe wasn't so much of the deaths that are already taking place, but for those of us that are still standing and still are basically strangling, trying to make things happen.
Yeah.
And you know what you say, we got to march on, march to the victory's won, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can't thank y'all enough
Thank you for
for your
having
time on
us.
Saturday evening. It was amazing. I'm glad it's going to be on YouTube for like life. So, so YouTube and Facebook viewers, we do thank y'all for joining us. Any y'all good with your last words? Y'all want to let them know your handles to follow you and your ministry
Oh.
and social media.
For me, it's Joy Moore on Facebook, and then for trying to keep it simple, and then on Instagram, it's Joy Moore _
Wow. I'm not simple. I'm extra. So so it's my government name on Facebook, Dominique Lest on Facebook. On Instagram, I am prophetic provocateur. Just trying to agitate folk and make sure that we're all fighting for this liberation piece. So I thank y'all so much for putting this together. Joy, I thank you for allowing me to share space with you. And to our host tonight, we thank you all as well for extending the invitation and being such gracious hosts. We're grateful to each and every one of you for allowing us to be here with y'all tonight. So thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Once COVID shift, hopefully we can get y'all to the campus at some point.
Please.
I want to come down to Fort Valley.
Yes.
One of my students just messaged me and said, "Tell them they took the revival tent down with grace."
Come on.
Somebody real churchy.
There he is. Oh, that is hilarious. But I do thank y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in as well. Facebook and YouTube. Be sure to share the video, subscribe, because there will be more content coming. Y'all enjoy your evening.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.